Welcome back to the channel. My name is Chris and I am a gorilla in the wrist. This isn't the video that I set out to make today. I'd intended to do the giveaway of the Skmei You Choose and I'll Review watch. But something arrived in the post today that made me think, no, I really want to do this instead. I will come back to the giveaway over the coming weeks. So this story starts three and a half, maybe 4 years ago, as I'm sure many of you recall. Casio had issued a metal G-Shock, very attractive, really nice. All of the functions and all of the strength of a square G-Shock, but in a metal case, quite astonishing. But it was quite expensive at £450. At some point, Skmei decided that they wanted to do a version of it, a sort of homage version of it, and this was it. And it was a bit of a hit. I think initially because it was only £12.49, and so it gave people a taste of what it would be like to have that full metal G-Shock. Quite clearly, it isn't a G-Shock. It doesn't have that robustness, but for the look, it certainly worked. And then fairly recently, I was on the Skmei official store, and I noticed this watch, which looked very familiar to me, as I'm sure it looks very familiar to you. And the question for me is, have they done it again? Is this another classic example of Skmei looking at a watch that is pretty expensive and offering up a version of it themselves? And so I ordered one, and it arrived today, and I wanted to take this early opportunity to give you my first thoughts on it. So let's get into it. So here it is. Before we get into the specifications, let's just do a very quick walk around so you can see it. Now, I don't have the full metal Casioak, which is currently available. However, viewers will be familiar with this one. The review for this was my most popular review. So you'll be familiar with this particular watch. I thought we'd have it here. I want to move the square Skmei shock out of the way. So what we have is a very familiar looking watch. The layout and the functionality of this is almost identical to its Casio Homage watch, but we have the we have the time and second. We also have the day of the month and a seconds hand. We then have world time. We then have a stopwatch. Which works like a stopwatch. There's a timer function, a countdown function. There is an alarm. I'm not sure how many. 2, 3, 4, 5, signal, and alarm. So 5 alarms and an hourly signal. And then we're back into time mode. The finishing on the watch actually isn't bad. It's very, very shiny on the sides. Very, very, very shiny. And the bracelet, you might be able to hear that. The bracelet is a bit rattly. And I think this is one of those areas where actually I don't think they've done it particularly well. I think in terms of the dial layout, I think it's very good. The other thing that I have to say is that actually I have the inverse display on mine, and I really struggle with it. You will have picked this up from the other review. If you haven't seen it, go and watch that. But I really struggle with this one. I do not have the same issue. So this isn't an inverse display, but actually it is very clear and very easy to read and doesn't have me scrabbling for my reading glasses. So I think they've done that really well. So we're going to run through the basic specifications for this watch. So we have a dial width of 41mm, a lug-to-lug of 65mm, and we are coming back to that, believe me. The lug width is not applicable really, as this is an integrated bracelet, and the watch itself, as it's quartz, has a thickness of 14mm. So the watch comes with a claimed water resistance of 30 metres. The crystal, again, is claimed as hardened. I have no idea what that means, if I'm absolutely honest. It weighs in at a reasonable 148 grams, and the movement is a movement. I have to say I don't know what movement is, but a standard and a digi movement. So let's do the gorilla gripes. So I think sadly on this one, the bracelet isn't brilliant. It does feel very, very jangly. And yes, I know it was only 14 quid, but you know, I have to review this for what it is. So I don't think that's particularly good. The other thing that is a tad worrying is that effective lug to lug is huge. And I am not kidding when I say huge. When I say huge, I mean enormous huge. To give you an idea, because those first two links don't articulate properly, I think we can probably say fairly safely that the effective lug to lug on this is 65mm. Now, I did wonder whether or not the original square Skmei Oak suffered from the same, and I remembered it did have the same holdover of it did have the same hangover of the lugs because of the articulation. And bizarrely, I think I may have forgotten this at some point, but actually it has roughly the same effective lug to lug on it of about 65mm. Now, for a lot of people, that is going to be problematic. I think if you are less of a gorilla than I am, I think this may be make it a bit difficult. It is going to hang over the sides quite a lot. So I think there's an issue there for people with smaller wrists. For me, actually, it doesn't make the blindest bit of difference. So let me just very quickly show it on the wrist. Cue elevator music. So because I have ridiculous, enormous wrists, it doesn't do it. It doesn't do that thing where it looks like there's a massive gap between where the end of the watch starts and where your wrist begins. Actually, for me, it wears really well. So I think whilst that is going to be a problem for people with smaller wrists, for me, nah, not a problem at all. So my final gripe with this is that it isn't a G-Shock. For Christ's sake, don't throw it against the wall or drop it out of a window. I suspect if you do that, you'll find it in pieces. Although, as other torture test videos have shown, the original Skmei Oak, the square one, people, hold it up the right way around. People did try these out to see what happened if you put it out in sub-zero temperatures, and actually it fared pretty well. I've seen people freeze them. So they have some robustness, but it isn't a G-Shock. Just remember that, kids, no throwing it out the window. So let's talk about the things I like about it. So I like the fact that it has very similar functionality to the Casioak. I like the colour. I think the colour works really well. I think they've done that particularly well. I like that it fits well. It is an easy to wear. It has sort of fairly standard push pins, and therefore getting it apart and getting it to a size that fitted me wasn't problematic at all. Very easy, in fact. It wears well. It's a comfortable, nice looking watch. The loom shot isn't overly impressive, but then it does have an electronic backlight, and therefore that's not as much of a problem to me. And then the final thing I think is just the price. I have had a look at the Casio ones and they look fantastic. They look absolutely brilliant. But at 450 quid, I'm probably never going to buy one unless I get one secondhand at a much lower price, because I'm just tight, let's be honest. However, this gives me something that has the look and the feel without necessarily sticking me with the price. So I think that's a massive positive for it. So I'm going to have a go at summing this one up, which is quite hard. So I started with the question, have they done it again? And I think, broadly speaking, Skmei have. I think this watch looks good on wrist. It's not an original design, but before Casio owners start screaming at me, neither is the Casio. There's a reason why we call it the Casioak, folks, isn't there? So I think it's pretty well done. I think the bracelet is a disappointment. And again, unlike the original square Casio Skmei, this one isn't quite as robust. And the finishing is what you would expect on a £14 watch. And quite clearly, it doesn't have the robustness. I wouldn't throw this one at a wall. When you actually look at the crystal, it's completely flat. So, unlike its bigger brother, where the crystal lays beneath the lip of the watch and therefore gives extra protection, clearly that doesn't. Oh, hang on, it squeaked. What have I done to it? Clearly this one doesn't do that. So it isn't a G-Shock. It doesn't have that robustness about it. But for me, I don't think that's a problem. I suspect people wouldn't be throwing their full metal G-Shock, Casioak G-Shock around either. So I think that's less of a problem. And I think at the price that I paid for this, which was 14 British pounds, why would you not want to have one of these in your collection? I'm fascinated on what the arguments would be. Now, I have to be honest and say at this point, we don't know how reliable this is going to be. It could be that next week it all goes badly wrong, who knows. But based on what I've seen today and from wearing the watch, this seems like a bit of a winner. And at 14 quid, what have you got to lose? If you don't like it, stick it on eBay and you'll get your money back. So for me, it's a Gorilla's thumbs up. I'm sure at some point I'll get my hands on the real thing. But in the meantime, it'd be good to have your thoughts on this one. As I say, this is fairly fresh, as this has only come in today. Be grateful for what you think about it. Would you buy one of these? Have you bought one of these? If you've bought one of these, let us know what your experience of it has been like. But other than that, just wanted to wish you all a fantastic weekend, and hopefully we'll see you back soon. Take care.